What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I'm your host, Patrick Mahomes is a douche. Alongside, as always, my co-host, Andy Reid can eat my shorts. Kadarius Toney is the Broncos MVP, and you're supposed to line up behind the line. How's everybody doing tonight?
Usually they tell me.
Yeah. They should have just given me a warning, man. Come on.
We're certainly doing better than the Chiefs, that's for sure.
Oh, God. How nice does it feel for us to actually be the media darlings for once and the Chiefs to just get ripped to shreds, man? It feels great.
Yeah.
How also nice is it that when our head coach is asked about the wild card spot, and he said, "Oh, we're one game out of the division lead." So he's not looking for wild card; he's looking for division champion.
He smells blood, man.
Yeah. What's the old adage from what is it? The Johnny Tsunami: "Go big or go home." Right? Go big or go home.
Yeah, and I think obviously, we'll talk about the Broncos win over the Chargers, but I think the first thing we got to talk about is the douche, Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs. Because, listen, nobody's debating the fact that Toney lined up offsides. Like, it wasn't even close. Like, when you are helmet to helmet with Von Miller, you're offsides. It's so aggravating that basically Mahomes took that win from Josh Allen by being like, "Oh, that was a horrible call." He doesn't care. Are
you saying he Kanye'd Josh Allen's Taylor Swift?
Yes. It's just, yeah. Okay.
Normally, I like Patrick, and to his credit, though, Mike, he did step back the next day and say he was embarrassed. I generally like him, but
Me too.
There was a more egregious offense even. I mean, the right tackle was in true form, as he's done all year. He was about 2 steps behind the line of scrimmage trying to get that, that early start too. So, I mean, that could have been 2 different penalties, and that right tackle one no one could argue. I mean, I just think it's very weird that the defensive players are not warned to stay on side, but we're now warning the offensive players to step back. It's weird.
Terry McCauley pointed this out on NBC in the pregame for Sunday Night Football. That has been called 11 times this year, and it was called a few times last year too. It's being consistently called. Granted, most of it is being called on offensive linemen during the tush-push formation. That's kind of the league's middle finger to the tush-push right now. They're enforcing to make sure that everybody's lined up onside on that, but they have also called a couple of times wide receivers being lined up offsides. And what's hilarious to me about this is Kadarius Toney, as Dan Orlovsky tweeted, he was lined up offsides 4 or 5 times in the game. It wasn't called. And then on that play, there was a tweet circulating that he checked with the official. No, he didn't. He didn't put his thumb up. That's normally the standard check with the officials, and the officials will normally look and give a thumb up back. Toney didn't even look back at the official after he vaguely raised his arm.
It's one of those cases where the awareness level of Kadarius Toney is like minus 1,000. Like it, and the thing is, like, when you just think overall with just when you line up rating, it's worse than a Madden rating. It's like a yeah. But like I think that, like, just how do you line up offsides? Like, I'm just genuinely asking, because it's like, typically you are supposed to check in with the ref to ensure that you are lined up correctly, which he didn't obviously do. But like, consciously, you're looking at the line yourself, right? Like, typically that's whenever I'm playing pickup football with everybody that I play pickup football with, I'm looking at where that ball is and trying to figure out, oh, that's where the ball is. So I'm going to line up, a little bit behind, or, not on the ball. So it's just like how consciously, I hate to use the word dumb, but how dumb, not even conscious, but how dumb do you have to be to not line up appropriately and, let alone, check in with the ref. And I think that, like, the thing with Mahomes too that it is just mind-numbing, and I appreciate the fact that he, took a little bit of a step back on it, the day after, but like that thing will live in infamy. Like his type of reaction, his type of response will live in infamy, and it's not just the response in that press conference either. Frankly, the worst video of it all is how sore of a loser you are in front of Josh Allen of all people, and basically telling Josh Allen to your face, hey, you know what? This was a really crappy way to lose. Like expecting it to be like
12 men on the field.
Yeah. Do you think Josh Allen in Russell Wilson's face went to Russ and said, we had 12 men on the field, man, we should not have lost that game? Or just like, or saying like, we didn't have 12 men on the field or something. Like, I don't know. It's a sore loser mentality. And I think that just the way that the Kansas City Chiefs season has gone, you're just seeing a lot of emotions boil over to not just Patrick Mahomes, but to the entire organization right now. Even Andy Reid has been chiming in the whole ordeal, which Andy Reid, like one of the best coaches of all time and possibly one of the more respected coaches of all time, is chiming in on this. It's dumbfounding.
Mm-hmm. You can really feel the tension.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Gage. No, I equated. All right.
No, you're up.
I was going to say, I equate it to golf. Like if Tiger Woods tees his ball up a foot in front of the tee markers that's a penalty. If Rory McIlroy marks his ball in the green and then doesn't put it back in front of the coin, but puts it to the side of the coin, it's a penalty. Like, it's pretty clear cut. So I don't know why it's not black and white in the NFL. That was news to me that was even a thing. But I Gage, to throw it back to you. I mean, it is kind of fun seeing a team that looked like they had it all totally together, kind of reeling a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And you can really just feel that tension boiling over in the locker room, man. Just with the way Patrick Mahomes is starting to exhibit his frustrations. I wouldn't have expected that from Patrick Mahomes, having that sore losers mentality. He's been around the realm of sports his entire life. He grew up in clubhouses of Major League Baseball teams with his dad being a professional baseball player. He's played sports growing up his entire life, yet here we are. I cannot imagine that this is the first time Patrick Mahomes has had a sore loss like that. I mean, you look at the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he was basically a one-man show out there with no offensive line against that Buccaneers pass rush. I mean, even then, he didn't have that sore losers mentality. I understand that this was some blatant ref ball, but dude, you don't expect that from somebody like Patrick Mahomes, but just the entire organization from Travis Kelce. He's been airing out some of his frustrations on his podcast, but to his credit, it's been more of like, what can I do better? He's been one of the first ones to be like, okay, I can control what I can control. I'm not playing my best football right now. I mean, I think back a couple of weeks ago when Travis Kelce had like a killer drop that sealed the Chiefs' loss. I can't remember when that was, but he took accountability for it. I remember he took accountability after the Denver game when I don't even think he played that bad of a game. Yet you see Patrick Mahomes after this situation, blaming officials. Okay, bud, if you're blaming officials, that is a loser's mentality. Jason Kelce says that same thing on the podcast. You didn't do what you needed to do if you left it in the hands of the officials to screw up on one play.
And that's what Mahomes said. He said it should be decided by the players, and it was. And like I mentioned to you guys previously, it was decided by a player. It was decided by Kadarius Toney to not have his head in the game and be clearly across the line of scrimmage. I mean, it was the officials even reported that they couldn't see the ball. Like they had no visibility of the ball because of the way he was standing there. And for them to act like that, just to finish the point, for them to act like that the refs didn't call this immediately and wiped out this incredible play, which it was. I mean, it was a fabulous, so perfectly done. But that penalty was called long before we knew anything spectacular or even a touchdown was going to happen. That was done right at the onset.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and there's so many like news outlets and media outlets that just been tearing the Chiefs apart, tearing Mahomes apart, like pointing out specifically the Super Bowl against the Eagles. Like,
What are you
you
doing
shouldn't
here?
have won the Super Bowl because of that play. Like,
Right.
if you're gonna open yourself up to saying like, well, the refs messed this up and that's why we lost, you have to open it up to everything, because everything then becomes fair game. And I love these like memes and photos and gifs and stuff of like Mahomes and the Chiefs, and like I'm a big TikTok guy, right? So there's this one guy that made a video where he's like, "There's no way Kadarius Toney's offsides," and then he showed a picture of Tony photoshopped over by the safety. And it's like, see, he's not offsides.
I think that was Ross Tucker, wasn't
It's so
it?
good.
So good.
But I did want to bring up a separate point that hasn't been talked about as much. We've complained for 3 seasons that the refereeing is just horrible. It's been bad and progressively getting worse. Now that you have the poster child for the NFL in Patrick Mahomes going after the refs, are we finally going to see some change from the NFL when it comes to the refs?
I don't know. The refereeing has just been all over the map, and maybe it does take a poor, entitled baby like Patrick Mahomes for something like this to happen. But I just think that I think as far as like in order for there to be change, well, it's funny that a correct call, right, like a correct offsides call, would possibly be like the start of a trend, for more correct calls in the future. But I think that the thing that we also have to keep in mind is it's like the umpire's argument in baseball, right? And I know that people have been, really, throwing out this idea of possibly robot umpires, and that's a topic for another day. But I think that the point is that there's a human element into this still, and like referees, they're not going to get every single call right. But I think that what they can possibly do is maybe look at it a little bit more, maybe a little bit detailed, spend a little bit more time in doing their own homework. In terms of maybe getting some of the calls right. So, I mean, maybe you start to see a little bit more of a detailed oriented, style with maybe the referees. And maybe that's, looking a little bit more in depth, spending instead of 10 seconds on a challenge, spending 30 seconds on a challenge. Is frustrating as that is for us fans. It's at least knowing the fact that there's at least spending those extra 20 seconds getting a call right than, spending 20 seconds and getting the call wrong still, on say like on a fumble. So I think, it's possible. It's certainly possible. But I mean, we also have to understand that they're humans just like the rest of us, and that they're possibly going to get something wrong.
And let me clarify just a little bit. So obviously we all understand that there are calls that are missed. There are calls that are made that are wrong. Like that's going to happen. Doesn't matter who the referees are or how much they've studied. Doesn't matter. It's going to happen. But the big thing that a lot of people have been calling out is the inconsistency in whether it be calls, whether it be fines, suspensions, whatever. So my thing is, if you're listening to complaints from teams that aren't successful in the playoffs, don't make it to the playoffs, have had losing seasons, that's not going to carry as much weight as, say, an Andy Reid and a Patrick Mahomes, who are 2 of 3 in Super Bowls in the last, 5 years? So that's why, in my mind, it's, okay, we finally have someone that is basically the poster child for the NFL. Like, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes probably makes the most amount of money for the NFL. So if they're finally calling out inconsistencies in refereeing, are we finally going to see something happen?
I don't know. I still feel like the NFL is probably going to take the approach of being stubborn in their ways, but I think there are solutions to some of these officiating problems. The XFL actually paints a pretty good picture of how you can do some of this stuff. I feel like fans would be less frustrated if we could actually hear what was being discussed, but between the official and the replay. Usually it's Walt Anderson in New York that handles this stuff. I think it's him and one other person. If we could hear the dialogue between the official and New York what's going on, we'd be a lot more accepting of the game going a little bit slower. And I think we'd be more accepting of it as fans anyway, just because we want the calls to be made correctly. I also feel like almost any penalty outside of like a hold or something like that, it should be challengeable. I understand we've tried that whole system with like reviewing pass interference and stuff like that. But again, I point to, if we could hear what is being said, the dialogue between New York and the officials, we could know what is being consistently called, where is the discrepancy here, and we could pinpoint what's going wrong and potentially make a change. So I just feel like there needs to be more transparency from the NFL, and using the XFL replay formula and challenge formula. The blueprint is right there in front of you, that yet the NFL is like, nah, we're good. We're not going to utilize technology. We're just going to rely on the human element of this, which, let's just be honest, it's not reliable like technology is. We as fans have the advantage of being able to be in our living rooms and see the real time, or the slow-mo, the close-ups, all that stuff. We can see that. Officials can't see that in real time. That stuff is available to be utilized, and it's not being utilized. That is the frustrating part to me in this whole argument. So I don't know necessarily.
No, finish.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the NFL is not very good about. Gosh, we must have a lag here. Sorry, I was going to say the NFL is not very good about admitting any mistakes or any wrongdoing. So I agree with you. I don't see a major changes, but I mean that blueprint is right there.
It is.
Well, and I think that to the point of your transparency, at the end of the day, like, if we can possibly get transparency on the whole referee situation, that is the ideal situation. And the XFL analogy, or just the scenario, is the best way to go. The only thing that I would possibly caution on something like that, as far as getting any call right, like as far as like a holding penalty or something like that, I'm with you. Like, we need to make sure that things are accurately called, if you will. The only thing that would almost dampen that a little bit is just, if you do something like that, you also will lengthen the period of a game out a little bit more. For instance, because that's was some of the biggest things with baseball, is like challenging balls and strikes, right? Or challenging foul balls, or challenging a play at first, and all these different options that are possibly challengeable. You can't necessarily challenge all of them, but there's certain things that you possibly could challenge that are game changing. So maybe you do bring back this whole pass interference idea, or possibly throwing a challenge flag on pass interference, and maybe what the NFL does is they separate this idea of the pass interference challenges versus the actual challenges itself, right? Because I feel like, there should not necessarily be a way where the pass interference challenge takes away from the actual challenge of it itself, if you will, in terms of like a spot of the ball, or a touchdown, or a key moment of the play where the officials aren't even reviewing it, right? So anything that is not going to lengthen the game, I don't think would be ideal, but also being transparency 100%.
Yeah, so we just got done talking about the Chiefs, which honestly is exciting, that we've just spent the last 5 weeks talking about wild card, and now we're talking about catching the Chiefs and possibly winning the division. Like, we're a game back. And I think there is a very real chance that Denver wins the AFC West. And that to me is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, something that we talked about before, which is, if you look at from, the Kansas City Chiefs schedule and the Broncos schedule, is it's roughly the same. And I think that's one of the reasons why, for one, the Broncos haven't won the division before. So it's a little bit hard for me to certainly say the Broncos will win the division, but they still have a chance at the division. And that's one thing that you should always do. And that's why the team is looking at the division and not the wild card, because, you should set your sights on something bigger instead of something, that's at this moment, just the wild card. But I think that, like, the way the season is ending for like the Chiefs and for the Broncos, it's rather similar. It's rather similar because, like, obviously for the Chargers is the last game of the season for them, And we know that Justin Herbert isn't going to be playing in that game. So it's going to be, Patrick Mahomes against Easton Stick for the final game of the season. And really, if you look at it, maybe the toughest game of their remaining schedule might end up being the Cincinnati Bengals, who may or may not have Joe Burrow at that time, right? Who may not have Joe Burrow at that time. So, but the remaining schedule for them is Patriots, Raiders, Bengals, and Chargers. And
and is it Browning? Browning hasn't been playing bad either.
He hasn't, but he hasn't.
But you can say the same thing. You can compare that to like Aiden O'Connell, right? First couple of games he was pretty good, and then it was like, meh.
Yeah.
Josh Dobbs, anybody?
Right, exactly.
And it seems like one of these quarterbacks always has like a primetime game where they break out, and that's what makes the national media freak out about them, and then they all come crashing back to earth. Happens every year like clockwork.
It's so true.
It's the Trevor Siemian effect, right? If we're going to use the Broncos analogy, it's the Trevor Siemian effect. But you just can't hold your hope that Browning's going to keep this up. As great as it is and as fun as it is, frankly, what it is actually doing is it's actually putting the Bengals in a prime situation to hold out Burrow possibly for the Chiefs game, depending on how Browning plays. Like if Browning continues to play really well and, has them in a winning streak, if you will, like you can put it to the point where you just have him rest up until that Chiefs game. And then that's when you can play him, when he's fully healthy for that Chiefs game. So, but again, you can't really just, hold out hope possibly that Browning's going to continue this into the Chiefs game.
Is there a report that Joe Burrow might be back? Because I heard that he was.
I'm just speculating.
I heard he was done.
That's what I heard. He was donezo, even if they made a playoff
Same
push.
thing with Herbert. He's done for the year too.
Yeah, I'm just speculating.
Yeah, he went on IR. I don't know if Joe Burrow. Yeah, he's on IR. I think because you could have activated him in theory. But Herbert, he's done for 4 games. Chargers aren't making the playoffs, so him being on IR in effect just puts him out for the year.
Yeah, but yeah, I think realistically for me, I don't see the Broncos beating the Chiefs for the division lead. I think that the Chiefs' schedule is easier than the Broncos' remaining schedule, but only because of that Lions game and just because we don't know. If it's the Lions we had before or if it's the Lions that are now. Because the Lions right now are looking pretty vulnerable. You would think that the defense will be letting them down, but it's been the offense. Jared Goff has not been playing well.
No, he did not. The defense, though, was not much better in that Chicago game. I mean, Justin Fields, both on the ground and through the air, was kind of torching them. I mean, they had almost no pass rush in that game. Their secondary had some breakdowns. This is mostly just going off the highlight reel. I haven't dived into the tape yet. I was going to do that this week. But just watching that highlight reel, it did not look like their defense was faring much better. And my business partner on the syndicate is a Lions fan, and he is consistently ripping the team for not properly addressing their pass rush outside of Aiden Hutchinson. They brought in a 36-year-old Bruce Irvin to put alongside him. And granted, Irvin actually had a decent game against New Orleans, but other than that, man, Bruce Irvin, I don't know about that one. So this Lions defense is very Aiden Hutchinson dependent right now, and the Broncos have a chance to exploit it. Their secondary has not been good. So this could be a chance for Russ and the Broncos offense to cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we would have to overtake the Chiefs by doing 2 games better than them in the final 4 games in order to get because we don't have the tiebreaker. So it is unlikely, but damn, it's kind of fun to be chatting about 13 weeks in with some winnable games ahead of us.
Which goes back to our fun conversation we've been having for weeks now in this winning streak is it feels so good to talk about meaningful football again, meaningful football where the Broncos are in playoff contention, and and kudos to how they've been able to play in that 5-game winning streak to put them in this situation, and even with a loss, stay mentally stable so that they can be able to, after a loss against the Houston Texans, where they still had a chance to win. We should not, forget that, where they still had a chance to win, come back and play a good game against the Los Angeles Chargers. And you go out and you play a Detroit Lions game where the emotions will be all across the board for that game. And so it's really important we should, not dismiss this. Emotions are going to be all across the board in that game. Just from the Sean Payton aspect, against Dan Campbell, like it's going to be really emotional, from that side of it to see, for Sean, so it's really important that the Broncos continue that mental aspect of their game, because they're really going to need it. And Jared Goff, if they can be able to create that kind of pressure, create that consistent pressure on Jared Goff, you will get mistakes. And I think the best analogy, and I've said it before in the Mainly Broncos podcast before, but like the analogy for me with Jared Goff is like he's a Colorado Rockies quarterback. He's so good on at home than he is on the road. But lately, it's just like he's not been as good lately, at home. And so I think that like he's a streaky quarterback. He is a streaky quarterback, and I think that right now you're catching him at a ideal time if you are a Denver Broncos fan, or even Vance Joseph. And the fact that they are blitzing and they're pressuring as much as they have, they will create many opportunities, for themselves. But, Detroit, and even with Goff, they have sneaky weapons on that side of the ball. Khalif Raymond, Broncos legend Khalif Raymond, he's stepping up a little bit. And Sam Laporta is having maybe one of the greatest tight end seasons, from maybe any tight end, really. And as far as the rookie goes, he's sneakily into the Rookie of the Year conversation. He won't win it, but he's sneakily in that Rookie of the Year conversation because of how he's playing. And he, of course, went to the University of Iowa, by the way.
Yes.
Tight end you.
But when it comes to Jared Goff and the blitz, he is the 30th ranked quarterback per Pro Football Focus against the blitz this year.
Yeah.
That could be a chance for this Broncos team to exploit that. On the converse, the Lions do have one of the brightest offensive minds in the game in Ben Johnson, who I feel like schematically could take advantage of some of the Broncos' tendencies to blitz and maybe integrate some of the hot routes, screens, draws, known ways to beat blitzes. I feel like Ben Johnson could do that. So the Broncos have a chance to get after Jared Goff and make him uncomfortable and force him into some of these turnovers that he's been prone to having over the last couple of games. So there's a formula there to beat Jared Goff, but the question is, will Ben Johnson recognize the flaws in his quarterback and work to mask them? So it's really going to be almost like a chess match here between Ben Johnson and Vance Joseph. And right now, I almost want to give the leg up to Vance Joseph because of what he did to that Chargers offense. He shut them down.
Well, and that's going to kind of be a head coach tryout, per se, for Ben Johnson, because his name has been everywhere for at least a couple teams. You're looking at the Raiders is one, the Chargers is one, and Panthers is another.
He'll never
those
go to
three teams. I doubt it either, but those three teams are like Ben Johnson's number one.
Don't sleep on the Bills if they fire McDermott.
Yeah. Well, and for Ben McDermott. And if Ben Johnson, if you're listening, do not go to Carolina. Well, thank you for listening, but do not go to Carolina.
Yeah.
And
so looking at
don't go to the Chargers either.
I'd rather you go to the NFC. You're staying there.
So just a quick look at the playoffs. Nothing really changed a lot, except for the Bengals are out of the wild card. Browns, Steelers, Colts is how it stands now. But I do feel like the Browns are now starting Joe Flacco. He had a good game, but it's Joe Flacco. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking after 2 games, the shine's going to come off, and then he's going to Joe Flacco it again. So I'm not too concerned there. The
shine does not come off elite, Mike. Elite,
yeah.
Keep the shine.
He's in his prime. Joe Flacco's in his prime.
Oh yeah, you can only shine a turd so much. The Colts are kind of iffy. I think Minshew gives them a good chance, but I don't know. They're just kind of average, I guess, at this point. I say all that to say this. There's always that one team every year that's a wild card team that is the most dangerous team going into the playoffs. And I feel like the Broncos making the wild card is that team. They're at this point, even with the Broncos getting 11th ranked in power rankings, at this point, I don't feel like there are many better teams than Denver in the playoffs.
I was going to say, frankly, the reason why there is so much chaos this year, as far as the playoff picture, is possibly because of two teams that no one wants to face in the AFC right now, and that's the Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos, right? Because of how good. Now, granted, CJ Stroud just had a concussion, so that's worth watching as far as and worth watching as the season progresses. But the reason why there's so much chaos this year is because the Broncos have resurged and have the winning record, and the Houston Texans have surprised everybody and are in playoff contention, and they're in the wild card spot, or they're in contention for it. So, like, the sole reason we're talking about this whole chaos is because of the Broncos and because of the Texans. So the Broncos are ideally a team that no one wants to face. And, sure, we may have our orange color glasses, at times, but I mean, like, the reason why the Broncos have been, winning football games is that they have a physical style of a team. And there's really only one team. If there's a few teams here and there, but if there's really only one team that can match the physicality of the Broncos, like currently right now, it's the Baltimore Ravens, which would be such a fun matchup between both of those teams. And we know that the physical style of play that the Broncos run, which is both running the football and maybe a little bit too cautious at times through the air, but the big plays down through the air, is something that I think would match really well as far as just an overall game between the Broncos and the Ravens. So I think that, like, those types of teams are just so hard to beat because that physicality just wears on you game after game after game. And especially with the offensive line that we have, how physically bruising they are in nearly every single game that they played in the winning streak. And until now, they're a top 8 unit, right? They're a top 8 offensive line unit. So it's just like the way things are shaping out is like they're going to be a really tough team to beat. And we know that if you can establish the run at the latter part of the year heading into the playoffs, that will actually benefit you going into the playoffs rather than hurt you. So the Broncos really are well conditioned right now to possibly make that run.
Yep. The Broncos have the formula. We do it again. Go ahead.
I was going to say, don't underestimate the fact, and I'm going to knock on wood, is how healthy the Broncos have been this season as opposed to other teams that, the amount of starting quarterbacks, the amount of star players that are either out for the season or miss significant time is like no other year I can remember. And fortunately, when that injury report comes out at the end of the week, and it more often than not says nearly all or all the players that were on the report practiced in that final practice before the game. We've been very, very fortunate, and hopefully we can take advantage of these next few games where we are playing in 3 out of the 4 or backup quarterbacks.
Yep. And what's nice about not only the schedule that the Broncos have going into this, obviously facing 3 backup caliber quarterbacks in this 4-game stretch, and then Jared Goff, who's very inconsistent and streaky. The other thing is some of our competitors for this wild card spot, such as the Houston Texans, Pittsburgh Steelers, Indianapolis Colts, Cleveland Browns, even the Bengals can get thrown in this conversation now. They play each other. A lot of those teams play each other. Yeah. So in effect, they can cannibalize themselves and one by one start to remove them from the equation until it boils down to the Broncos, basically. The Broncos have such a favorable matchup because they have those tiebreakers against the Bills,
and the Browns.
It's going to come into such a big factor there where a lot of these teams can, again, just essentially cannibalize each other over the next 4 weeks. And the Broncos are hopefully going to be able to take care of their business and win the next 4 games.
I feel like with even all of that, that's one of the reasons why you hate to throw around, I guess how big, the must wins are. And we've said that word, I feels like ad nauseum these last few weeks, but like this Detroit Lions game, it feels like a must win to a certain extent, because if you win that game, like I got a chance to read up on like the playoff percentages. Like if the Broncos, win that Lions game, how big of a jump like, the Broncos possibly have to make the playoffs if they beat the Lions. I think it's like a 50% jump possibly as far as how they can make the playoffs. If they can do that with the road and the road that they'll possibly be on, they have a shot. They have a legitimate shot, I would feel, to control their own destiny and possibly clinch a playoff berth in week 17 and not week 18, right? Like, so if they can possibly do that, then you're talking about that Chargers game, being maybe the game where they can possibly take care of business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're at that point now in the season where one game makes a difference, like to make the playoffs. I mean, you look at the Browns, Steelers, Bengals. I just looked at the schedule. They all play each other at least once in the next 4 weeks. And then the Colts and the Texans play each other the last game of the season. So all these teams are going to play each other, like Cam said.
And the Steelers and the Colts are going to play each other too.
Yeah. So
and the Steelers feel like they're in total free fall right now.
Pretty much. So, I mean, one game is going to make the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. And the only team that none of those teams play is the Broncos.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are scenarios out there where the Denver Broncos could get the 5th seed, let alone the 7th seed. We could be talking like 5th, 6th seed here. So that's the benefit of having all these teams play each other and basically knocking themselves out of this chase. And the Steelers free-for-all is another big contributor to the Broncos being potentially in play for the 5th, 6th seed. And obviously our tiebreaker over the Browns and the Bills as well, most of the Browns.
Well, and Jay Bryan brings up a good point. Like, Miami's not a shoe into the playoffs either. That could throw a monkey wrench into things. Because if they drop, you think they'd get seeded over the Broncos, right?
Yeah, but they would have to crash and burn.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, let's put it in Nebraska terminology, okay? Nebraska was 1 win away from going to a bowl game, right, Mike? They were 1 win away from going to a bowl game, and they never made it to a bowl. So Miami, they're 1 win away from going to 10 wins, right? So in essence, in order to kind of make the playoffs, you'd have to get to 10 wins, right? So they have to kind of lose almost all of their games to not make the playoffs, which
okay.
Tyreek Hill is hurt.
Have you seen the remaining schedule though?
I mean, it's definitely brutal.
It's Jets, Cowboys, Ravens, Bills.
It's definitely brutal.
The Bills are 2 games back. So there's the potential. If the Bills figure it out, they go over the Dolphins, and the Dolphins drop into the wild card.
I also don't think the Cowboys win in Miami, though. That just smells like a big-time upset loss for the Cowboys, because I think they're going to be favored going into that one. And that just smells like trouble for Dallas going into Miami in December. It's going to be hot, humid, and miserable.
Yeah, I think that last game against Buffalo might be a play-in game for the Dolphins.
But even then,
unreal.
But even then, Buffalo has a pretty brutal end of the schedule. It's not just it isn't just the it's not just the fact that they played the Chiefs. What was it in the last game? So they play. So they have the Cowboys, right? They have the Cowboys this weekend. Then you have the Dolphins to end it, right? So it's just those 2 losses potentially going, 8 losses. That's going to possibly put them at a chance of going 9-8, and I don't know if that's going to get in.
Yeah.
Do you think the Cowboys can go and win up in Buffalo, though? I really don't think they can.
But they just won in Philly, though.
It's hard to say.
And that was in Dallas.
Oh, I thought that was in Philly.
Yeah.
Nope, that was in Dallas. It's gonna. Let me look and see what the weather in Buffalo is going to be on Sunday.
I have to admit,
it's actually going to be pretty mild for Buffalo, 46 degrees and cloudy, so might not be a factor.
I was going to say, I have to admit, I actually was hoping the Chiefs would win that game, not because of any other reason. I knew the Chiefs would make the playoffs, and the Bills are such a threat, and that would have given the Broncos 2 steps up on Buffalo since we hold the tiebreaker with them. It is still fun to see Mahomes have an absolute meltdown, and we'll see what happens with the division. It's so unlikely, though. It would have been nice for one of the real top contenders to be bounced out a little bit.
Yeah,
true.
All right, let's swing over to kind of recap the Chargers game, it was complete domination. It wasn't even close. Like, it very balanced offense. The defense was hitting the quarterback. They were getting pressure. They were getting turnovers. Like, we lost a couple players. Do we have any updates on? Sorry to swerve, but like, have we heard anything on Benito? I know Cooper was hurt at one point. Cooper was back, but do we have any updates on any of that?
I don't think we've heard anything on Nick Benito. The positive, if you will, is of course Quinn Miners. Quinn Miners is expected to actually be back and possibly even active this week, which is big. He's probably your best.
And he left within a regular heartbeat, right?
Yeah, he left and he seems stable, that's really great to see. It was a really scary situation, especially given everything now. Just as far as the heightened awareness since the DeMar Hamlin situation, it's just really nice to see Quinn Miner's situation be resolved rather quickly. And then and so but as far as Nick Benito, we haven't heard much if anything. That is definitely one that bears watching, because he might be maybe your best pass rusher statistically right now from what you're seeing. He made a play. He made a play in that Chargers game. It was I want to say it was early on, like in the first half, maybe even the first quarter. But he made a play that was proof why pass rush win rate and his quick first step is a big deal for where he's at in his career right now with the Broncos and leaping in his second year. He timed the snap perfectly and got in the backfield just in time before the pulling guard was even going to get there. And you could probably put it on maybe the pulling guard or pulling tackle was maybe a little bit late there, but the guy Benito jumped it perfectly and maybe so much he actually couldn't even get there. But Benito has been your best statistical pass rusher. They need him healthy. They need him to be in this game. So I really hope that he's able to be back here, because they really do need him.
I even thought he had a nice play against the run in that game. He went and he blew up, I believe it was Isaiah Spiller in the backfield.
I think that's the play I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah. You had said pass play, so I wasn't sure if that was the play you were referring to, but that was a really freaking awesome play by him, dude.
So we're finally seeing, we've been seeing Zach Allen get better as the season progresses. Now we're seeing Baron Browning getting involved. We're seeing Jonathan Cooper get involved. We're seeing Nick Benito. You've got McMillan blitzing, coming from the backfield, knocking the ball out, which, by the way, we've been talking all season about how we needed a corner opposite of Surtain. I think McMillan's that guy.
I don't think he's opposite of Surtain, though. That's the thing. He's actually playing the nickel role, but I think that but the thing is he is, me and Gage were talking about it, before, we went live, but it's he is playing at such a high level. If you guys have not even had the chance to watch the video yet, go out and watch Brett Coleman's video. He gives a huge kudos to McMillan, in that video, and actually just the overall defense as a whole. But he is a absolute film rat. I mean, you want to look up film rat in the dictionary, you will see McMillan's name by it. He studies the game, he studies his butt off, he knows exactly the responsibility that he's in nearly every single situation. There's the reason why the Broncos are in where they are, frankly, is possibly because of McMillan. He's a playmaker. He's able to get in the backfield. He's creating turnovers. He's exactly what the Broncos have needed at a time like this. And frankly, I was somewhat kidding, because I think maybe they have some more years with him. But the Broncos need to have a conversation about giving him a raise at this point, the way that he's playing, because it's just he is playing at such a high level that we have not seen since, I believe Jeff Bryan commenting in with Chris Harris. We have not seen that high level play of a nickel corner since Chris Harris Jr. And I think that he's playing at such a high level right now with his ability to get in the backfield and get even sacks. So I think it's crazy to think that at this point in the season, and even with the 5-game winning streak that they had, he has 2 sacks. He has 2 sacks, and corners typically don't have that amount of sacks, if you will, and 2 interceptions, and not to mention a forced fumble, if you will. a fumble recovery. So it's just like he is just. There's two plays that just vividly ring in my brain, and it's the interception of Patrick Mahomes, and it's the play in the Buffalo Bills game on like the very first play of that drive when he just rips the ball out of James Cook's hands, I think it was, and it was a live ball. Like those plays just instinctually just of who you are as a football player, and he is the main reason why I would say that the Broncos are playing at such a high level.
And
there was another one too.
Gage, go ahead.
God, I'm so sorry, Glenn. We were delayed. There's another one too where Jaquan sniffed out a throw that was coming from Keenan Allen. I mean, he blew that play up. He knew that was coming. He studied he saw something on tape on that. Just the way that Brett Coleman highlighted how much Jaquan studies, like Cam said, it's absolutely incredible. He's so instinctual, and you saw that in training camp, and now that we're seeing it translate onto the field, you could argue that the biggest reason for the defense making such big strides aside from the pass rush is Jaquan McMillan's level of play. And Zach Seegers put out a tweet that said that the Broncos could, in theory, keep Jaquan McMillan around for several more years on vet minimum deals through tags and whatnot. I'd like to hope that the Broncos reward him for his high level of play and maybe give him a little bit more money, because he really deserves it. The fact that he's only making, I believe it's like $750,000 this year for what he's brought to this team, give that man at least a couple mil.
Yeah, that hurts my heart a little bit. Like 725,000. It's only 720. Right.
But we complain about
terms though.
Exactly. Comparatively speaking, right. And we complain about the refs, and we say that there should be, some more review. And the people that did the review absolutely got it wrong on that. That was not a pass play. That was a strip sack return for a touchdown. It was incredible effort by Jaquan, and he got robbed of a touchdown with that. Jeff Bryan also mentions Josie Jewell. He had six different players had sacks in the game, and Josie shot through the line. I've never seen him run so fast in his entire career. It was just spectacular. What's so fun about this? You can see the not only the belief in themselves, but these guys are having an absolute blast, and the coaches are having a blast. After that last touchdown pass, you saw Sean Payton smiling like he was proud of himself. Then he's like shoving Russ, which was my favorite part of the game. Like as Russ went by and shook his hand and he gave him like the push. Like this team really is having a good time and is really, really tight. And I think this guy could be the limit of the schedule.
I was looking at the spot track, and what's actually really nice, and I will say this, is the Broncos do have his control even beyond 2024. So once he hits 2025, he's an exclusive rights free agent. So if anybody that doesn't know what an exclusive rights free agent is, it's basically he's not allowed to sign anywhere else. The Broncos basically hold his rights, so they can in essence sign him, and then at that point in 2025, they can maybe bump his pay, but surely. In 2024, we can have a conversation of possibly bumping up his pay, and maybe not necessarily making him an exclusive rights free agent and making him, so he's a unrestricted free agent like 2027 or something. But, there's another guy that we do have to praise. And I think that's the Bash Bro of Josie Jewell. And that is Alex Singleton. Alex Singleton, he's actually playing like a Dean Portman right now. Like he is playing like a man possessed. I mean,
throwing out that Mighty Ducks reference. Yes,
absolutely. I love some Mighty Ducks. D3 is the best Mighty Ducks movie, by the way. Not any of the others.
Shut your face.
So, but he is playing like a man possessed. I mean, it's just like, and I think that's the thing is like there's a statistic where I think he's at like 134 tackles or something, which is like fourth in the NFL right now. And like, that's never really been a huge problem for him. It's just the missed tackles portion of it. But the last few games, the last few games and maybe the last 3 games for Singleton, it's like a light went on where we're going to mix the aggressive nature that we're going to play with some discipline. And like he's playing smart. He's playing like a physical brand of football that we haven't seen since last year, if you will, with the Jiro Evero. Like the sack that he had on Justin Herbert, where Herbert was almost going to get rid of that football. And Singleton was like, nope, as he's starting to corral him, on that sack. And it was just like, he is just playing out of his mind. And frankly, I know we did say that McMillan may be one of the biggest reasons or the biggest reason why they're on the run. You do have to give kudos to guys like Josie Jewell and guys like Alex Singleton and guys like Zach Allen. Zach Allen, of course, and even some of the players, that are on some of that defensive line. Mike Purcell is another one. We've not talked about his name, but Mike Purcell is one of those players that has really shined in some of the spurts that he's been playing in this year. I mean, like so far, like the Broncos defense just as a unit is playing so well. And PJ Locke, man, PJ Locke is another one where we said, you're getting to the point where Kareem Jackson, you may have to think about, taking his, starting spot away. This was that game where you're probably firmly saying to yourself, you know what? We love you, Kareem, but we're going to have to give you a little bit of a lesser role on your defense, and we're going to have to give it to PJ Locke, because as much of a gamer and a game breaker that McMillan has, PJ Locke has possibly been as much of that as well, with his ability to get in the backfield.
Well, and that's
he
one
had
of the
the
names
strip
I
sack
was,
bungle on the final play.
Yeah, and that's one of the names I was going to throw out was PJ Locke, because we talk about McMillan and the progress he's made and how well he's playing now, but how much of that attributes to being able to have PJ Locke there to drop back in coverage or to pass a receiver off so that you can do what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that because VJ is getting so creative right now, like he's in his bag every single week right now, it feels like. And I think that what's going to be so great is you're going to see him get very creative with how he uses certain, defensive, designs and stuff like that. Like we're starting to see him integrate Drew Sanders more and possibly into pass rush situations, which is great to see, because like you want to make sure you're utilizing a talent on the field, and put him in advantageous situations that's best for him, right? And so I think that what's going to be great and possibly like maybe when Kareem is back is you have the possibility of using a 3 safety look, right? A 3 safety look at times with Kareem and PJ Locke, where in particular Kareem and Locke, you really don't know what they're going to do between PJ and Kareem. Kareem may end up being your enforcer, but who knows? Like by the time even with this before the suspension, Kareem was actually playing really good football, and who knows? Like he may actually play high-end football when he comes back off the suspension, which I would venture to say that emotions will be riding high for Kareem once his suspension is done.
Mm-hmm. Especially after the meeting he had with Roger Goodell, where he basically got the answer that, it's on defensive players to protect the offensive players, even though you've got guys like Tom Brady, the best to ever do it, go on and say that's BS. It's on offensive players to protect themselves. I mean, him saying that he wouldn't throw to certain spots on the field when guys like Ray Lewis or Ed Reed or guys like that were on the field, that just goes to show you, man, offensive players are getting way too much protection. You think about the Luke Musgrave hit where Kareem Jackson is trying to lead with his shoulder, and then Luke Musgrave pivots his body in a different direction in order to try to fight for some more yards, and that's when the contact happens. Kareem Jackson cannot control the fact that Luke Musgrave put his body in a vulnerable position there. He was trying to lead with his shoulder, yet the NFL is saying, that's on you, Kareem. It really infuriates me, the treatment that defensive players get consistently getting the short end of the stick. It's so frustrating.
Cam was talking about the Bash brothers, and Avatar referenced it earlier, but they were both in the DNVR bar with Zach Todd and Henry today, and it's definitely an hour worth spending. Really, I mean, first of all, they're both hysterical. But the guys are really interesting. And one of the things that Josie said, and he mentioned it multiple times, was the communication. And we've talked about that, is that at the beginning of the season, there was no communication between the players on the defense. And that has been one of the big differences. And I bring it up in a lot of different shows because the players throughout the course of the week keep mentioning it. And what's interesting too is that they talked about before the games is that both of them do not listen to music before the games. They just sit around and chat with each other. And that's how they get pumped up. And they actually just talk regularly on the field as well. It's a very interesting relationship, and it's been one that has paid a ton of dividends, especially in the recent weeks.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the defense. There was a question that Biggie Bronco asked a while ago at the beginning of the show that I was saving for this moment. I know we were going to talk about the Chargers games, but to be fair, the Chargers suck, and there's nothing really to talk about. So I want to bring up Biggie Bronco's question. He says, if you guys are going to give this defense a nickname, what would it be? He says he wants to name it Wrecker because once they hit you, it takes a tow truck to get them off the road.
I don't know. I kind of like embracing Dirty Denver, man. I think the national media wants to give us that label. Embrace it.
Yeah, I kind of, as much as I did not agree with it at the time when the Denver Nuggets had it, the Denver Nuggets were called the Thuggets at one point in time with Kenyon Martin, and because that was kind of like their physical brand of basketball. And I feel like I'm kind of with Gage. Like, I may not necessarily agree with the Dirty Denver, right? But with the way that they're playing, they are they're embracing this idea of a physical brand of football, and so I mean, and maybe it's one of those things maybe the players are without saying it, they're subtly embracing that, they're subtly embracing the enemy mentality, if you will, but that Dirty Denver mentality of just that physical brand of football.
It's my favorite brand of football.
I'd have to think about it. I don't know. I want to throw out a lot of names, but they're all sexual, so I'm not going to say it. So I'll just give me some time to think about it.
All right, we'll do that. You mentioned the national media. Hasn't it been kind of interesting? Some of the real change, especially the change when it comes to Russ. And CBS Sports put out, they showed his post-game interview the other day, and Russ was, really inspirational, and he was saying, just normal Russ stuff. And the caption was, Russ makes me want to run through a wall for him. And it's like last year it'd be like Russ makes me want to bang my head against a wall. This year or this week, I just saw that NFL on Fox, their power rankings, the Broncos are up to 7.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how they're finally coming around, and it's got to be less exhausting on the players to hear a lot of that negativity as well. So, but I like Dirty Denver. I like it.
Yeah. Well, kind of continue with the Russ talk. It's kind of where I wanted to go. I think there's 2 things we need to talk about offensively. One, obviously, is Russell Wilson playing well as always. I mean, again, there are still some things where it's like, what the hell? But at this point, it's like Russ has to stay for another couple of years. Get somebody in to back him up, maybe learn. But at this point, with how well the Broncos are playing and being under the belief that the Broncos offense will get better after some more time in the system, you have to think we're sticking with Russ. Now, to kind of mold that into something else, before we went live, we were talking about if there's an issue between Russ and Judy. Obviously, there's no issues between Russ and Sutton because Sutton's just catching everything. But it seems like there's some sort of disconnect, or Russ ignoring or Judy or something. There seems to be something going on between those two.
I kind of liked Cam's point on this in our little pre-game discussion here. Go ahead, Cam. Floor's yours.
Yeah, so I just think that everybody knows I'm a big Jerry Jeudy fan, but I think that we're getting to the point where I think where we're at, I feel like it's almost with what we're seeing, it's like what the defense was dealing with at this point in this, at the early point of the season. I feel like it's just a big miscommunication, because I feel like if you look at it from the way even things get misinterpreted, if you will, on X and Twitter with like what's a heated discussion versus not a heated discussion. Because I think that like with the way things are operating from the Jerry Jeudy standpoint, I think it's just a miscommunication. It's frustrating, and I think it's certainly frustrating for fans to see. And I think that from Russ's standpoint, like it's a case where this was a game where, like in the Houston Texans game, you want Jerry Jeudy to get more targets. Well, you got to take advantage of it, and that's Jerry Jeudy's fault on that. You got to make sure that you capitalize on opportunities like that. But I think we're entering a conversation with Jeudy where he may not necessarily be best suited, and this is where it falls into this, is that he may not be best suited as a outside wide receiver. And I think that in terms of if we're planning to best utilize Jerry Jeudy, it's from the slot. It is from the slot, and I think that we know that Jeudy is possibly a yak monster when he's in the slot, and I think that if you can possibly get the ability to use that out of him with, say, 2 outside wide receivers, maybe that's bringing Tim Patrick back, or drafting another boundary wide receiver, or possibly even keeping Tim Patrick and still bringing on Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy will actually be a pretty effective slot receiver with Sean Payton. I really do, and I think that so much so that let's not get it twisted too. A slot receiver, and I'm not saying Jerry Jeudy is possibly going to end up being wide receiver 1, not with the chemistry that we're seeing with Courtland Sutton, because it's out of the window now. But I feel like the slot receiver can still be possibly your number 1 weapon. I mean, Tom Brady made a living off of that with guys like Julian Edelman and Wes Welker. So like it is certainly possible that like with the way that you look at it from Judy's point of view, is like it is best suited for him to be in the slot. And frankly, I think it's way more dangerous the way that he's operating in space from the slot.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, to the point of bringing back Tim Patrick, I think that the Broncos should bring Tim Patrick back and then draft an outside guy, which gives you the freedom to move Jeudy to the slot. I feel like that would really be the best suited thing. And then I know a lot of people are going to say, what about Marvin Mims? I think Marvin Mims is still trying to develop his route tree as a player. There was a stat that I saw on Twitter that the only route that Marvin Mims is consistently really getting open on is go routes. He still needs to get his route tree a little bit more under control. I can't remember what chart it was that I saw that from, but it was kind of eye-opening seeing that.
And end arounds. He's really good at end arounds.
Or not good at.
not good. Yeah.
Nobody's good at that.
He actually got one that broke. I believe was it this game, or was it?
Yeah, it was the Chargers game, but he had to break a tackle to get there.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so Marvin Mims, I feel like still needs some time to kind of microwave. If we were to utilize him on go routes or post routes or stuff like that, just use him and take advantage of that vertical speed, then okay, great. We've got a nice niche player there. But I really feel like, again, utilizing Jerry Jeudy in the slot, much like Cam said, is the best way to utilize him, get the most out of his route tree, just get the ball quickly into his hands, have him run a little sit route out of the slot, just quickly get it into his hands and let him do his thing, man. Let him get that yak, which he clearly wants to do. Having Jeudy on the outside in physical situations where he has to consistently fight through contact, I feel like that's not the best role for him.
And we're talking about all this offensive stuff minus a pass-catching deep threat tight end. Taking nothing away from Troutman, but I think that's the one spot on offense that we're missing that could add to this, whether it's in the draft, whether it's getting Dulcich back, whether it's free agent. I feel like we have a lot of blocking tight ends, and we're missing that other threat that would give us, you're looking at 4 to 5 threats on the outside. If you're looking at Dulcich, Sutton, Mims, Jeudy, and then Tim Patrick when he comes back.
Yeah, you're going to say something.
Brandon Johnson.
Yeah,
Brandon Johnson.
God, yeah.
The tight end position is the absolute. That has been a total backbreaker for the Broncos in many scenarios this year. I love Dulcich. I'm a little bit concerned though. you see over the course of time that when a guy has these hamstring issues, it generally follows them throughout their career. I don't know what he can do to. I mean, they were even talking about changing the gait of his running. So it's almost like retraining the guy how to run properly, not to make him susceptible to these. So I do think that a pass catching tight end is definitely going to be somebody focusing on.
Glenn, you talk about hamstrings, and you can be the most talented tight end in the room, or you could be the most talented wide receiver in the room, but if you have just really bad hamstrings, they linger over time. And of course, who I'm referring to, KJ Hamler, like KJ Hamler and Greg Olsen. Well, I think Jake Butt was like ACL.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like injuries after injuries after injuries.
Right,
but all the talent in the world just couldn't utilize it.
And Jake Butt it haunts me because like he was such a great draft prospect. And just to see, unfortunately, the injuries just creep up, just that one just really hurts me. As far as the Russell Wilson and Sean Payton discussion that you mentioned earlier, Mike, I think that you don't need any better evidence than the the hooping and hollering after the Adam Troutman catch, which was a perfectly designed play by Sean Payton, by the way, which he took a page out of a state championship play call, and not only that, but I think he even took a little bit of a play out of the Jacksonville Jaguars playbook from the playoff when when those Chargers blew another 24-point lead. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Never too soon, by the way. Never too soon.
Right. But I think that like we're looking at it from the standpoint where I think you're starting to really see the marriage between Sean and Russ really take shape. And I think that, and this is actually something that I think we talked a little bit about it, how possibly it was a communication thing, possibly between the defense and, them getting better, or possibly, Vance Joseph just really switching things up and really starting to coach his unit. I feel like still we know that this is Sean Payton's team, right? And I feel like at the 1-5, I'm just merely speculating here, but I feel like there had to have been some conversation between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson and Sean Payton and Vance Joseph. And just from the Russell Wilson point of view, there had to have been some conversation about, hey, this is the structure of the team that we're going to be going forward with. And this is the offense that we're going to have to run, which is those short intermediate passing routes, a heavy, reliable running game. I really need you on board for this kind of offense. And Russ signed off on that, right? Russ probably signed off on that. And he probably said the exact same thing to Vance Joseph, which we know he probably needed a certain talking to after that Miami game. So again, I'm surely speculating here, but I would imagine with this being Sean Payton's team and the way he operates possibly in that Bill Parcellian, situation, I would imagine that there was some talking to with Vance Joseph, but like you're starting to really see the fruits of the labor really, bearing as far as with what you're seeing with this offense. Like the offense is moving the ball rather effectively now. And like, even though it may seem like they're moving it in quicksand at times, they're still scoring over 20 points nearly every single game, it feels like. So you are looking forward to the day where it really comes together, like what we saw against the Cleveland Browns.
Mm-hmm. And I think that interaction that they had on the sidelines between Peyton and Russ kind of sums up how nuts Broncos country goes when Russ has a bad game or when Sean Payton has a bad game. Like, we've been talking about it for weeks. Everybody was on Russ. Like, we need to get rid of Russ. He's missing wide open receivers. He's missing this. He's missing this. He's not doing that. We need to get rid of him. And then you see a game where Peyton and Russ are just hooping and hollering, having a good time, smiling at each other on the sidelines because we overestimated. And I say we as in us too, because we've gone off the deep end sometimes. But it shut up, Glenn. Like, it's just like it definitely shows that Peyton and Russ are on the same page and working together and taking this a game at a time instead of us thinking that Peyton is having a talking to with Russ on the side because he's been so bad, right? Like, it just kind of shows how much it gets blown up out of proportion.
Yeah.
And, for all the short passes, the fact that the Cortland Sutton touchdown bomb was the longest pass in the air in the entire NFL this season.
Yeah.
And Court made another spectacular circus one-handed catch, just goes to show that Russ is bought into this whole thing. He's famous for his long bombs, but these 6-yard passes, these 5-yard passes, these little dink and dunks that have been safe and effective, he's fine with that too. I bet he's not sitting at home looking at the stat sheet going, I wish I had more yards. I love the fact that he's bought into this. And it's just the watching that relationship grow has been pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. You can see it. Russell's bought in. Yeah, he seems more and more comfortable on each and every single week. Like, I felt like in this game in the first half, there were some failures on third down that kind of sputtered things a little bit in the first half. Obviously, that first interception where Russell could have delivered a better ball, but you don't really want Marvin Mims to literally shove it into the belly of the defender like he did. So that one to me is more on Marvin than on Russ, because, yeah, it wasn't a great throw, but Marvin had it in his hands and then literally just shoved it right into the defender. So I don't know, man. I feel like with Russell Wilson, I still have about like a 25% reservation of like, okay, maybe because of the finances you move on, but also I'm starting to get towards ownership probably doesn't give a crap. If they want to move on when the finances are rough, they will do so with no questions asked. I think they're ready to let this play itself out and see where we can go with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, because we're starting to see the results. And we're seeing, even after the ugly first part of that Houston game, you saw Russ get better in that second part of the game. I mean, Obviously the final play was just a disaster all the way around, but that wasn't even all Russ. That was just, again, Sean Payton named the play chaos. But it feels like Russell Wilson is getting more comfortable each and every single week. And even me, who's kind of had some reservations just because of the finances, I'm starting to realize I don't think ownership gives a shit about that. They just want results on the field.
Well, and with this whole results thing, and again, like let's look into the future a little bit on this. And granted, the Broncos, they haven't done this yet. They haven't clinched a playoff spot. I have a hard time, because I know that even there's probably going to end up being a conversation of, the Broncos moving on from Russ, even if they make the playoffs, right? I'm sure that'll end up being a conversation. I'm here to tell you, I have a really hard time with the franchise moving on from Russell Wilson, knowing full well that they made it to the playoffs for the first time in like 8 years. I have a really hard time about that. We can possibly talk restructure and pay cut at that point, but there's no conceivable way Russell Wilson was playing on another football team in 2024. He is, if he's this bought into Sean Payton, there's no reason to move on from him. But it goes into, I should say, like the ideal scenario that I've mentioned before is do a restructure, do some sort of pay cut, and still do not rule out the possibility of taking your quarterback, right, Sean? Taking your quarterback in 2024 that you can possibly sit under Russell Wilson. It may take some time, and this is also something to where it's like for guys like, for Taysom Hill, where he's not shied away from taking maybe quarterbacks. Granted, he had a lot of versatility and everything, but he's not shied away from taking those quarterbacks and taking those chances on, something like that. And as far as taking possibly a guy like Jaden Daniels, I still don't think that happens. The more the Broncos push for the playoffs, you're more talking about possibly scenarios where you take a guy like a JJ McCarthy, someone along the lines of that.
A first-round tight end.
Or a Bo Nix, right? But yes, so somewhere in the likes of where you're taking a quarterback in the second round and third round, as and not necessarily a player that is a quarterback in the first round. Take if you're lucky and you're fortunate to get a Brock Bowers, unlikely, but hey, you get a Brock Bowers, I will be a happy camper,
And with the ownership group that we have, I don't even think it's a pay cut. I think it's just a restructure where you cut the cap hit and add in guaranteed money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I'm not a mathematical wizard. I only took up until, college math, like 101. I stopped there. Okay, guys, like I'm not a
struggle
math
with 2 and 2, so it's fine. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. So
I think like maybe one next year fully guaranteed, and then the following year be like a player coach or like a team option or something like that. I could very easily see like he could have some incentives to play into another year, but have next year be fully guaranteed at like, I don't know, $45 million. I think that could be realistic, and have most of it be in the form of a signing bonus. That way it's a cap friendly deal. You can do that.
Yeah. So take a big cap cut, and then with I think they said the cap is going to go up to like 242. And so with the cap going up and then taking a cut on the cap, you'll be fine.
Yep. I don't think Russ would be too mad about fully guaranteed money.
No.
Yeah, and we've said it before. I don't necessarily think Russ would shy away from, possibly taking that, and possibly even mentoring a quarterback like that. I really don't, because like I think that as much as Geno Smith has taken a back seat, like there's a reason why the Seahawks took a chance on a guy like Geno Smith, and the year after Russ moved on, like he played exceptional football the year after Russ, and there is a real reason why. It had nothing to do necessarily with them moving on to Russ, but probably the fact of what he learned under Russ and how to manipulate the pocket and how he learned to perform in a Pete Carroll system. So I think the importance that you can have of a backup quarterback is pretty vital, and so I think that the Broncos do have to take advantage. But I can see Russ actually saying yes to that.
And Geno would be the first one to tell you that too. Like he attributes a lot of his later success in his career to being able to sit under guys like Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning, but he especially talks about those years under Russ and what Russ was able to do for him just to help him find his confidence again. But also, the play style, being able to manipulate the pocket, all that kind of stuff. Geno heaped a lot of praise on Russ for him being able to have this late career success.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Sean Payton and the Broncos have been the most successful under free agent quarterbacks. Like, neither one of them have drafted a quarterback that was majorly successful. I mean, you're looking at John Elway, you're looking at Peyton Manning, you're looking at Russell Wilson, you're looking at Drew Brees. All of those were free agent quarterbacks from other teams. Technically, Elway was the free
Wasn't
agent.
Brees a trade?
Brees
was Brees a trade? Or
no, he wasn't a trade. No, it was free agent. It was free agent because the Chargers let him walk in free agency that year.
Dolphins
cut him for the shoulder.
That's right.
Yep, Dolphins passed on him. He went in there, and Nick Saban said that was the biggest regret that he's ever had in his entire football career.
That's right.
So I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I don't know, but to want the Broncos to trade into like the top 5, that's not going to be a thing. There's way too much you'd have to give up to get into the top 5.
Yeah,
we finally got picks back.
Right?
We can't moonwalk back into that situation again. I mean, we still don't even have a second round pick in this upcoming draft. Listen, we're going to be fine if we continue on this trajectory, and these players continue to be developed. I think we're all right. And also, I was going to ask you guys. George Payton's definitely back next year, right?
It's funny. It's funny you say that.
I think everybody is.
It's funny you say that, Glenn, because as we were having this conversation about cooling down and players that are on the cool seat now, we haven't said his name. We haven't said George Payton's name. And if there's, as much as we also want to heap praise to Vance Joseph for the way that he's calling and he deserves the credit, well, the performance that we're seeing on the field are some of those draft picks that George Payton, has drafted, guys like Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper and and Nick Bonito. So like the way that you're seeing this unfold, yeah, absolutely, he has cooled down a little bit. And I think that here we go again. Like here's a case where it needs to be brought back up again. When Sean Payton was brought into the New Orleans Saints, Mickey Loomis was already there. And and then at that point in time, they started establishing that friendship and that relationship with one another. And then obviously that grew into a much bigger friendship over the years, and they grew close over the years. And I think that we need to really, bring that back up again with guys like George Payton. I think that, I think that the one area where you could really utilize George Payton is obviously the draft. Like he is a really, really good scouting, person as far as in that department. Maybe to what Big E Bronco says, maybe keep him away from free agency, divvy that up a little bit to, the guys
But
like
even that's hit and miss, though.
No, I know.
mean, P. Ryan, you've got Singleton, you've got DJ Jones,
No, I know, I know, but but even by that same token, I also have a hard time of keeping him 100% away from free agency because any non-toxic organization would not be like, hey, George, we realize you're the general manager of our football team, but we want you to stay away from, free agency. No team's going to do that. A competent organization is still going to get, feedback, from George and, Sean is possibly hey, how would you be able to, work possibly this into our budget, or how would you be able to work this, and is this certainly a player that you could see us, going after and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's some pretty nice back and forth between George and, we know
Biggie, we know it's a joke. but to add to that point, I mean, we gave Powers a hard time at the beginning of the season, but he's panned out. You've got McGlinchey, who still isn't my favorite, but he's gotten better. I'll put it. He's gotten better. I'll say that. But I mean, you finally have those two players, along with Cushenberry playing really well, and Quinn Miners playing well, and Garrett Bowles being back to form, where you finally have a solidified offensive line.
Yeah.
But also look at some of the other things that Peyton has done. The Jaquan McMillans of the world, the Jaleel McLaughlins of the world. He's found these undrafted free agents that he's brought in that are making some impact. I mean, Jaleel's cooled off a little bit, but the guy really does know his stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So I know that we've gone a little bit long. That's fine, but we're not done yet because I want to make sure we cover that Lions game. I think, as big as we thought that Texans game was,
yeah,
I think this one's even bigger because of the position the Broncos are at right now to make the playoffs. This game is huge.
Like I said, there's a lot of emotions going to be riding into that game with the master and the apprentice, with Sean Payton and Dan Campbell. There's going to be a lot of emotions. The good news is we will get a handshake after that game. We will get a handshake after that game.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Ray says, is it going to be around year 3 for us to really see anything from Riley Moss and J.L. Skinner? Is it 3 or 2? Because this is rookie year, right?
Yep. Both. This is rookie. I would say probably year 2 for Riley Moss, because I don't think Fabian Moreau is going to be here long term. I think they're hoping Riley can maybe develop into that long-term boundary corner. But when it comes to somebody like J.L. Skinner, I don't know, man, because, again, P.J. Locke is playing really good football right now, and you've got Justin Simmons. You might have
your two. Stearns coming back.
Yeah, that's another one where it's going to be like, okay, we might have Caden Stearns and Caden Stearns and, oh, Jesus, why did I lose his name?
Simmons?
No, Caden Stearns and J.L. Skinner. The guy, the whole point of this conversation, J.L. Skinner.
And also Turner.
Everybody's forgotten about him.
Yeah, Turner Yell as well, but at this point, I'm almost writing him off at this point. Hopefully, he doesn't write back and proves me wrong. But yeah.
Now I will say this though. You brought up
go ahead.
Fabian. You brought up Fabian Moreau. While he's not great, he's better than Mathis. So,
I actually think Fabian Moreau's been playing some good ball.
I think he's played okay.
Yeah, he's playing more than okay.
Yeah, I mean, not really like McMillan level, but he's been playing good.
Well, okay, first off,
starting caliber.
McMillan level is like all pro.
That's what I'm saying.
Fabian special, man.
Yeah. Fabian Moreau is just playing he knows, he's comfortable in his role. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he may give up some plays here and there, but yeah, he's definitely been more than capable.
All right, good, solid veteran starter, man. That's what Fabian Moreau's been. I just feel like they drafted Riley Moss. They traded up in the draft to get him. I feel like they want him to be that long-term answer at boundary corner. We found our nickel long-term, it feels like, in Jaquan McMillan. Obviously, Pat Surtain's a freaking stud. If we can solidify second boundary corner spot, I mean, you've got a potential no-fly zone level secondary. You really do, especially
for a while too.
Yeah, I mean with Justin Simmons and PJ Locke there at safety, obviously the depth you have there. Whenever you have to get into dime, you've got plenty of guys that can go into that. I mean, this team can have some real big time depth in that secondary for years to come.
Yeah. You know, this sounds so biased because it is, but like the
well, at least you said it up front.
Yeah, but the way things are trending is there is no person that is, you know, happier for that man on the wall, Justin Simmons, because like the more this trend continues and the Broncos play really good defense and his contract is up in like a couple of years, the Broncos can possibly reward him, give him that Broncos for life extension, and he can actually be a Broncos for life, you know, and that he might be one of the very few people in sports to possibly retire with one organization.
Yep. All right, so we started talking about the Lions game. We don't need to go into a big summary, but who do you think pulls that one out? Saturday night game, another prime time game. But who do you think pulls that one out?
I'm gonna err on the side of Detroit. No, go for it.
Gage, go ahead. No,
I'm gonna err on
it now.
I want to follow this
because I think that they know the scenario for this game. This is a big game for them as well. They could potentially kind of lose some of their momentum that they've had. Obviously, these last couple of weeks have not gone very well for them. This kind of feels like for them a get-right game, just knowing what I know about this Lions team and fan base being partners with the lead of the Detroit Lions syndicate. So I know that is going to be how that fan base views it. I think that Ben Johnson is going to have a really good scheme to sort of mask some of Jared Goff's issues against the blitz because he knows that Vance Joseph is going to blitz left and right. This is going to be one where it feels like Russell Wilson is going to have to win a shootout potentially. And I think that at this point in time, we've already gone into one of those kind of games against Houston where at least in the first half, that's what it was kind of like. And then it fizzled off a little bit. But I don't know if this team's ready to win that kind of game. This is the one game Broncos have that they can give in their final stretch here. So I think they are going to give it. I don't think they're going to go in there with the mindset that they're going to kick their ass, but I do think the Broncos will give this game, but I do have it as their final loss of the regular season.
For weeks during this year, you know, I thought Detroit would manhandle the Broncos in this game. And then with Denver going on their stretch, with the game being flexed into a Saturday night primetime game, with Detroit really floundering, and Gage mentioned a couple of weeks. It's been, I'd say, really like the last 5 weeks they've really struggled. I mean, if they didn't lose, they almost lost. I mean, they had to come back against the Bears in Detroit in those last 4 minutes to eke out a win there, and then the Bears ended up beating them just this last weekend. You know, Detroit is really on the ropes, and fortunately for them, they're in a weaker division, or at least a slow starting division, at least for the other 3 teams. But I mean, I think we're catching them at the ideal time. And even though it is the one game that our chances of the playoffs don't really drop that much if we happen to lose because they're the NFC team, I think the Broncos pull this out, and I think that we're going to see a lot of passing in this game.
There he is, Optimistic Glenn at it again. Optimistic Glenn. No, see I feel like there's these things and trends that you see sometimes in the NFL where teams just have a certain division's number. And for anybody that has not been keeping track about what's been going on with the Broncos in the NFC North, if the Broncos beat the Detroit Lions, they will sweep the NFC North because they will have beaten the Lions, they've beaten the Vikings, and they've beaten the Chicago Bears, right? They've beaten the Chicago Bears. So I think that teams just have a certain number, like against the division. Now, does that mean it's going to result in a win? I think that for the Broncos, they got to be able to create that pressure on Jared Goff. If they can create that pressure on him, you can you have a higher probability of, for getting, those turnovers possibly. And we know that in this string of games that the Broncos have been able to put together, if you can win the turnover battle, you have a greater chance of possibly winning this football game. And yeah, the Broncos have, put up over 20 points per game, but the reason why they're putting up those points is because the defense is helping them out, and the offense, more importantly, is helping out the defense by putting it in the end zone. And so I think that, oh man, I'm at the point where I feel like this is going to be a really good football game. I actually think this is going to be a really good football game, and I think it's going to be better than the Texans game. I don't know if it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a kind of a defensive game to a certain extent, because I think that the way the Broncos play, it kind of sucks teams into a little bit of a defensive game. But the question is just, will the Broncos have that one position? Will the Broncos have that one possession or two possessions where they can finally create that separation against the Detroit Lions? I'm actually going to go out and say it. I had it actually that this was a loss, but just something tells me that the Broncos are going to do this. I feel like it's just the redemption game. The fact that they had the Texans game, I think, has prepared them for this kind of game against the Lions. I think the Broncos pull out. They get to that 50% ceiling after this victory. And I think that they kind of smell blood in the water. And I do think that Sean Payton will not allow the Broncos to have the game that they had against the Houston Texans.
I think that
you guys are all going to do it, huh?
I think you guys might think I'm a little bit crazy, but I think that the Detroit Lions were tailor-made for the Broncos. You look at the strength of the Lions, it's the offense. Is the Lions offense better than our defense? I don't think so. Is the Broncos offense better than the Lions defense? I think so. I still think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be close, and I think it's going to be a battle. I think it's going to end up like 23-21 Broncos. And that's with the Lions coming back at the end.
I got it at 31-24 Broncos, and I think there's at least one defensive touchdown, maybe two.
That would actually be the first defensive touchdown. If that is the case, that would actually be the first defensive touchdown on the season, right, for the Broncos? Because they've never had a – they were close. They were close because I think Jonathan Cooper was like inches away before he scared us all.
Dude,
yeah.
Jameer Gibbs scares the crap out of me.
Yeah. Well, and
even if it's not him, David Montgomery too.
Well, that's just the thing. It's like, if there's one thing, here's the thing. If there's one thing, we didn't talk about it much, and I know we praise Mike Purcell and guys like Zach Allen and DJ Jones to a certain extent, but like, if there's one thing and you're going to nitpick this defense, if there's one thing we've seen over the weeks with this defense, it's that run defense. And David Montgomery and guys like Jameer Gibbs, they do scare the crap out of me because we know we've seen it over the years. I've been a Broncos fan for a while. We've seen it over the years with guys like Darren Sproles. Jameer Gibbs is frightening. Austin Eckler, at times has been frightening when the Broncos have played him, unless it's, split reps, and your head coach is Brandon Staley. There are times where I think an elusive running back like that for Jameer Gibbs can give the Broncos fits.
Dude, that's a good comparison for the Lions is like the Chargers, except better coached, right? Like explosive offense, meh defense.
Yep.
So I'm going to go with probably the Detroit Lions 28-24.
You're fired.
All right.
So
no, I can see it though.
From his volunteer position, yeah.
No, but I can see it though, especially from the running game side though. Like if you have Montgomery and Gibbs in there at the same time, you don't know where Gibbs is going to go because they can use him anywhere they want. That's kind of what we thought McLaughlin was going to be doing. He hasn't, but you look at Jameer Gibbs, you're like, where's he going? Right? Yep. So I that was the hardest part, was figuring out. I mean, my score is strictly orange colored glasses. I don't care. I'm going to pick the Broncos. But you can easily see how the Lions could win this game.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's a reason I picked it as a loss in the beginning of the season. Like,
Okay. If you were wrong, you need to dye your hair black. You don't deserve red.
I say 24-20 because I said it's going to be a drag it out game. I think it's going to be 24-20. I think the Broncos do pull it out, but it's going to be a drag of a game, but a physical game. Like it's going to be a physical game, and yeah, we'll see. If the Broncos can handle Myles Garrett and Khalil Mack, they can handle Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah,
they can handle Aiden Hutchinson,
and he's all they really have on that pass rush, man. They got the land before time, Bruce Irvin. That's about it.
And that's what I was gonna compare that kind of to the Browns defense. Myles Garrett's all they've got.
No.
Well, you can say whatever you want. Myles Garrett's pretty much all they've got on that Browns defense.
Mike, I love you.
For pass rush.
Love you, dude.
For pass rush. Sorry, for pass rush. Myles Garrett's the only weapon they really have. For pass
love
rush.
you, but no, dude.
No.
On the Browns?
They have Darius Smith.
No, Darius Smith, Shelby Harris on the interior, Dalvin Tomlinson. They've got guys, man.
Whatever.
They have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who may be, one of the better underrated linebackers in the NFL. Yeah.
No.
You're just a hater. Go drink your Mountain Dew.
I'm just a hater.
Drink your Mountain Dew.
But no, yeah, they Aiden Hutchinson is really all that defense has at this point. They don't really have any standout corners. Their linebackers are me. Safeties. They don't really have anything.
They really have a really good corner by the name of Darius Slay, right? Oh yeah, he's in Philly. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
That Lions defense, man. I mean, it's a bear covered when you really look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so everybody's got the Broncos winning except for Hater Gage. I think that about covers it. I mean, this has been a long episode, but there was a lot to talk about. Loved every minute of it. Loved every single person that joined us in the chat. We love you guys. The conversation was great. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. And make sure you check out all of the other shows on the MHRT network. We got shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the neighborhood on every game day. You're especially going to want to check out the next episode of 5280. We have a very special guest named Ricky Cobb coming over from Super 70s Sports. He's hilarious. It's going to be a great time having him on the show, and we thank him right now before he even comes on the show. We want to thank him for being on the show. So make sure you check that one out. And let's all cheer for the Broncos this Saturday and hope they get a win and secure a wild card spot. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come